So you ever see drivers talk about landing a unicorn ride? Well, you ever wondered what they were talking about? Well, unicorns, well, they're those coveted high-paying trips that drivers used to get that are quite rare, and that's where the whole cherry picking came from. People used to pick going through trying to get these rides. Well, guess what, guys? In this episode, I'm going to break down the coveted unicorns. I'm going to see if these are just a thing of the past or if they're still out there, they could be found. So like and subscribe. Let's get in this episode. I'm going to break down and explain the coveted unicorns. So, unicorns used to be those rare, high-paying trips. They were coveted by all drivers. Why is that? Well, because they would be sometimes like a short trip that they were just paying a huge amount of money and you're only going a few miles. Or maybe it was like an hour-long trip, but they were paying hundreds of dollars and you were almost like, I can't believe somebody would pay that much, or that Uber would pay me that much to drive that far. Because not all those trips are always just long paying trips. A lot of times you can get really good rates for short trips. Those would still be considered unicorns, even though a lot of people do think unicorns are like long hundreds and hundreds of dollars of trips. Well, just think back at TPC, you could consider a lot of those trips unicorns. I was driving literally 3 to 5 miles, getting $50 for a trip. That's a pretty good trip. That's actually better than driving super far and getting paid hundreds of dollars, because I was able to do multiple of those, like 10, 15 times in one day, hitting that event back to back to back to back. So those are unicorns. Now, unicorns, are they still around, and why do you not see them so often? So now, like I said with TPC, that's actually the times nowadays that you're really going to see them, and they're still not even that good. But you're going to see unicorns usually on big events, and especially during holidays like 4th of July and New Year's. But actually, this past 4th of July, they weren't that good. Now, TPC was actually around the time when the rates started to get lowered. So this next TPC, well, that's going to be up for debate whether it's going to be as good as last year, because you have to remember, every year now, or even every 6 months, it seems like the rates get lower and lower. Why is that? Well, it's a lot of new people, and Uber is just lower rates. But back to the unicorns. So unicorns, are they still around, and why are they disappearing? Are they actually going extinct? Well, they kind of are. And the reason why is just what I just said, is because Uber's lowering its rates. So the only times you're really going to see them is when Uber really needs you. So why were unicorns even called unicorns, or why were they even those type of coveted rides that drivers would get that you would see on Reddit posts and stuff? Well, a lot of times, like I said, they were part of events. So you'd have TPC, or you'd have some big concert or some type of festival in your certain area, and maybe you're in a different city. I always say TPC because I'm over here in St. Augustine, Jacksonville. That was one of our biggest events. But you know, Georgia, Florida's not that busy, and that's a huge event too. But maybe you had like a big concert, a big festival somewhere where you're at in your city, right? But maybe you don't have as many drivers in that area. Or let's take Augusta for example, right? Augusta Nationals is the Masters. That's one of the bigger tournaments, bigger than TPC. Well, Augusta's not a big city, so there's probably going to be a lot of drivers that go to Augusta just for that event, same way they do TPC. You might see a lot of Uber Black drivers. You might just see a lot of drivers that are doing taxis and stuff like that, same way with TPC. But the thing about it is, small area, not very many drivers. So the thing about it, you're going to see the prices are going to go up. Why? Because there's so many, few 100,000 people going to this tournament, and they're staying locally, but they're all going to need rides everywhere. Why? Because most of them don't have their cars, or they're drinking a lot so they can't drive. And then a lot of them, they're on business, so they got clients, stuff like that. So what do they want to do? They want to show off, and not really even show off. They just want to make sure those clients are comfortable, so they're going to escort them around. They're going to pay for that. So you're going to see a lot of unicorns, or what are considered unicorns, because you're going to see higher pricing rides, because Uber is honestly charging more money and they're going to pay you more money because they want to make sure those people use them over Lyft. And they're going to raise the rates because Uber knows, well, there's that many people in this small of an area. They're all going to need rides. Well, we're going to charge them more money, and we know we can. And they got the data because they know every year they can keep doing it. So there are going to be certain events, certain places, certain times of the year that are going to have higher rates, and they're going to have what are considered unicorns throughout the whole week. I mean, literally, when I worked TPC, I worked just the event. I could have worked other times of the day and still made pretty good money. And it wasn't even necessarily the surges that made it, because there wasn't no $20 surge, no $30 surge. There was $5 surges, $7 surges, stuff like that. But $7, $5 to get a $50 ride to go 5 miles from TPC down to Jacksonville, or down to St. Augustine, or over to Jack's Beach, no. That's nothing surge related. But then again, you do have the surge in driver app, and you have surge in a rider app, and then Uber just automatically is charging more for the fares. So that's what the unicorns come from. They're going to come from events and certain areas, certain times, because there's certain things that are going on that Uber's going to charge more money. But also too, there's going to be special cross-town things where people denied that trip, they don't want to take it, and Uber just automatically says, you know what, we're just going to take a loss, or we're going to charge them more, but we're going to pay you more just because we need that ride. We want to make sure this person's happy. So every once in a while, you will get that unicorn, because Uber, that person keeps trying to order the ride, but then nobody will take it after so long. And you know what? I got a good example. I've had a lot of people I take to Orlando to the airport. They say the biggest problem they have is literally getting a Uber back, especially if they had delays and they land late at night. But you got to think about it. Who wants to drive all the way from Orlando to Jacksonville at 12 o'clock at night, 2.5 hour trip, and then drive back empty 2.5 hours? That's a 5-hour trip. You're going to get back at 5 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to do that? Well, hardly anybody. And I know people tell me, they said, yep, the biggest problem is not getting to the airport, but getting back from the airport. Why? Well, because of the fact that nobody wants to drive from Orlando to Jacksonville. Same way, a lot of times people don't want to drive from Jacksonville to Orlando. But you're always going to have those new people that don't really know anything, that just see that high price and take it, when they don't realize that it might be a high price, but it's not a high enough price to actually make it worth it until they do it, and then lesson learned. But that's part of unicorns. And you know what? If they're going to pay you to do it every once in a while, they're still going to come about. But they're just not as often as you think. But then again, it does depend on the time of the year. It does depend on what's going on in your area. And then also to be considered a unicorn, or what can make a trip from a non-profitable trip into a unicorn, is honestly something that's actually related to the rider, and that's called a tip. Somebody could literally generously tip you a couple $100. Say you picked them up at the casino, $30 rides, nothing special, but they won 20, 30, 50,000, whatever. They won a huge amount of money. They hit a jackpot. Well, they just tipped you a couple $100, $500, $1,000. Well, that's a unicorn. And that's definitely because you took that trip. It turned into a unicorn, all because the rider tipped you. So a tip can literally turn a bad trip, a non-profitable trip, a mistake, into the best mistake you've ever made, because of the fact that you were like, damn, I couldn't believe I took this trip. You're kind of mad you took that trip, and by the time you dropped them off, you were so glad you took that trip. And that's a unicorn. Literally, and it just manifested from a regular old horse, one beaten down, into like a unicorn. So you're like, wow, I can't believe I actually got that trip. Well, that can happen. It's rare, but that's why it's called a unicorn, because it rarely happens, but it does happen. Every once in a while, you get those people that got some money, that want some money, and they've been where you've been, or they work in a service type industry, and they just happen to come into some money, and they say, you know what, I like you, we had a great conversation, we had a great ride, I want to pay you for it, here you go. That turns a regular trip into a unicorn. So there is a way to get a unicorn that Uber's not involved, and then that's where you keep pretty much most of it. And you know, Uber didn't really get nothing out of it. They don't even know. But it's why it's called a unicorn, because it rarely happens. So now, why do these unicorns rarely happen nowadays? Well, like I said earlier, because Uber's dropped its rates. Why do they drop their rates? Well, because they're trying to compete with cab companies, Lyft, and some of these new gig app companies that are coming out there trying to give us 100% pay a subscription, all this. I'll cover those on another episode. But basically, Uber's trying to kick out these cab companies because they got quite a few lawsuits pending. So they're really trying to make it hard on them because they figured, you know what? If we lower the rates, we don't have, it doesn't matter to us because we're passing off to the drivers. Well, you guys can't make any money. You guys can't fight us in court. So that's what they're trying to do, is literally push out all those remaining cab companies and pretty much corner the market, which they kind of pretty much got it cornered anyways, honestly. But a lot of people are being burnt from Uber, so they either go to Lyft or they do private rides or they figure something out or they just do it, use them anyways, and they just got nothing they could do about it. It's just one of those things. But that's why you rarely see them, is because they've lowered the rates. That's why. But also too, because you have competition. And I mean competition is, I mean you have more drivers, you have newer drivers that don't know what they're doing. They obviously haven't watched these episodes, or they just haven't been paying attention, or they just don't know any better because they're renting, got a quota or whatever, or they think, you know, oh, I'm just gonna do this or do that. It's all trial and error sometimes. That's why I make these videos. So if I break stuff down, if I show you stuff, and if I explain every different detail about Uber, well, maybe I can help you make a more informed decision. So that's part of the problem why you don't see them as much, is because of the trip radar. If you notice, they do trip matches. They do matches, not requests or exclusives. They actually do matches. Well, when they do matches, that means they're sending out multiple trips, and those multiple trips are going to different drivers at different prices. First one to take it that got the cheapest price is gonna get it. I don't care if you're closer or farther, because Uber does not care how far you are. I see trips all the time. I'm going 10 miles, pick them up, drop them off 2 miles. Yeah, that's crazy. So Uber doesn't care about how far you are. They only care, will you take it for the lowest price? So that's part of the reason why you don't see very many of them, is because of the fact there's more competition, there's more drivers out there than there used to be, there's more drivers sign up daily, and there's more new drivers that don't know what they're doing, that just take everything because they're trying to be diamond, they're trying to do this, or they renting the car, or they got somebody that they rent from that they have to take every trip because that person wants all the money. So that's just how it is. That's another reason why you don't see them that often. But there's also one more thing. But also the reason why is they might offer those big expensive trips, but even though it's expensive, even though it's a big trip, if it's a long distance trip, it's a one-way trip and you're going multiple states, just because it's a unicorn, just because it's a lot of money, still might not be worth it. Because if you got to drive somebody 6 hours, but they're paying you a lot of money, but you got to drive 6 hours one way, 6 hours back, or even longer than that, you're going multiple states, you're going to have to stop, you're going to have to do all this, you're probably not going to take it. So that's part of the thing too, is just because it's a long trip, just because it's a lot of money, doesn't always mean it's worth it. And just because it's a unicorn doesn't mean it's always worth taking, because you might pay a lot, might be going one way, it might be a high price, it might be attractive, but it still might not be economical. It might not be the right thing to do, because of the fact that, well, you have to think about it. Well, how many hours am I going to take to do it? Is it worth it? How much will I make if I didn't take it? If I worked that many hours in the same area, how many miles I put on my car, how many times I got to fill up? A lot of little different things that can add up. And then sometimes it just boils down to plain, I don't feel like driving that far. Yeah, that's a good amount of money. Yeah, that's probably more than I'd make all day, but I don't want to drive that far and drive that far back. So that's part of it. I mean, you could drive literally 6-7 hours, drive somebody, get paid a good bit of money, but then you got to drive all the way back. Like when I drove to Atlanta, that 12-hour trip's pretty exhausting. Imagine if you drove somebody all the way there and then you got to come all the way back. Yeah, that's pretty exhausting, and that's a long trip, and it's not even just about miles, but it's like, oh, got to get an oil change here soon, I got to do this, I got to do that. So that's part of it too. So, you know, unicorns are still around. They're in some areas, there's certain times of the year, and they're still going to come, but they're probably not going to be quite as much as they used to be. And that's part of Uber dropping the rates. But always remember, if Uber really needs you to do something, they're definitely going to pay you. But even if they do pay you, they're definitely we'll just pass that on to the passenger. Because one thing Uber's good at, they're passing it on to somebody else. Whether they charge that rider more and just pay us more, or they charge them less and pay us less, one way or the other, they're going to pass on the expense either to us or to the rider, because at the end of the day, Uber's going to win no matter what. Now, every once in a while they might lose, but they're still winning. Why? Because somebody still took a trip and you're still doing it, because you're going to be like, oh, I love it, this is great, and then you're going to keep taking more stuff, and then you're going to forget about it, and then you're going to get frustrated. And at the end of the day, they're still keeping you driving, so they're winning. Yeah, they might have took a loss on that trip, but really, are they really taking a loss if you still keep driving, you still keep taking the rides, you still keep complaining, but you still work for them? Well, to me, that's a win for them, at least, because you might be complaining, you might be mad, but you're still doing it. You're still working, you're still driving. So that's part of the thing, is they're going to win no matter what. As long as we still drive, as long as we still take these trips. They could pay us more if they want. There could be an event, they could pay us more. If you strategize and if you look at stuff ahead of time, I mean, you could probably drive around the country and actually work a bunch of events and probably make pretty good money. But same time, you have to stay somewhere, you have to do all this, so there's a lot that goes into it. But unicorns are still around. They're probably still going to be around at least until it's only autonomous vehicles. Then at that point, they don't have to pay nobody. All they have to do is charge the rider. All they have to do is pay people to charge the car, to do the maintenance. They're only basically paying mechanics at that point. They don't need drivers. So until the day when there is no more Uber drivers, period, and it's straight robo-taxi or Waymo, well, there's still going to be a few unicorns, but they're going to be a little bit more mythical, a little bit more rare, a little bit more coveted, because you're not going to really see them as much. That's why they're unicorns. And don't forget, sign up for Gridwise. I do appreciate it. It's a 14-day trial. It is affiliate link, but it does help you, and it does let you know about those airports, because you know what? Maybe you catch that unicorn at the airport. You never know. Or maybe you catch one in that area. You'll know which ones will work. It does help you out with that. But honestly, guys, let me know down in the comments, what's your best rides you caught? What unicorns have you caught? You guys caught some good unicorns? I know you guys probably have. Honestly, I ain't really caught too many. Most I ever did was a couple to Orlando. I've never really seen no couple $100 rides. The best rides I really ever got was during TPC, and those were literally $50, $60, $70 rides. I was driving a couple miles. Now, if you looked at them, you'd be like, oh, unicorn, that's not really a unicorn, but really it was, because the amount of miles I drove and the price I was getting definitely was a unicorn. But I've never done one of those $200-$300 rides. Never had anything like that. Most I had was a couple $150, $175 going to Jacksonville to Orlando, and those were early on when I first started driving. Now, I've been baited to pay to go to Savannah, go to Tampa quite a few times, but $175, $180 to drive 3 hours just wasn't worth it. It wasn't even really $1 a mile. And one of them was a comfort ride, which, you know, usually when you get those long distance trips for a comfort ride, they're usually pretty good because they're like $1 a mile. But 3 hours at the time when it came through, I'm not doing it. Mile all the way to Tampa. So that's about what I got. I've only been doing it for about a year and a half. But I do see a lot of crazy rides on Reddit. I'll probably show you guys a couple of them on here, let you see. But even on those, I mean, I never got them, so I can't confirm whether they're just photoshopped or whether they're real or whatever. But that's just part of it. So like and subscribe, guys. I do hope you guys like this episode. I just figure I'd throw something out there. A little bit of informative episode, just showing you guys a little bit about unicorns, what they are, and, you know, just for a lot of general info for other people. And you know what? Hopefully you catch one. Let me know about them in the comments. Like and subscribe. I do appreciate it. Thank you, guys.